Welcome, football fanatics and history buffs, to a journey through time, a dive into the heart of a rivalry that's more than just a game. Today, we're unraveling the intricate tapestry of Senegal and Morocco, two giants of African football, two nations bound by history, culture, and a shared passion for the beautiful game. This isn't just about 90 minutes on a pitch, it's about 60 years of brotherhood, electrifying football battles, and diplomatic secrets that have shaped the destiny of a continent. So, grab your favorite snack, settle in, and prepare to be captivated by a story that's as compelling as a last-minute winner in a World Cup final. Imagine, if you will, the vibrant streets of Dakar, the bustling souks of Marrakech, the rhythmic beat of African drums echoing through ancient Medinas. These are the sounds and sights of Senegal and Morocco, two nations that, despite their geographical distance, are intrinsically linked. Their relationship is a complex dance, a delicate balance of competition and camaraderie, a testament to the enduring spirit of Pan-Africanism. But how did this unique bond come to be? What are the threads that weave together their shared narrative? Our story begins in the crucible of post-colonial Africa, a time when nations were finding their footing, forging new identities, and dreaming of a brighter future. Both Senegal and Morocco emerged from the shadows of colonialism with a fierce determination to chart their own course. They were pioneers, trailblazers in the grand experiment of nation-building. And in this journey, football, as it so often does, became more than just a sport. It became a symbol of national pride, a battleground for identity, a reflection of their aspirations. Think back to the early days, the 1960s. The air was thick with optimism, the future brimming with possibilities. Senegal, with its vibrant intellectual scene and its charismatic leader, Léopold Sédar Senghor, was a beacon of cultural richness. Morocco, under the astute leadership of King Hassan II, was a kingdom steeped in history, its gaze fixed on modernity while cherishing its ancient heritage. Both nations, in their own unique ways, were carving out their place on the world stage. And as their respective football teams took to the pitch, they weren't just playing for a win, they were playing for their nations, for their people, for the very idea of African excellence. The early encounters between Senegal and Morocco were not just football matches, they were diplomatic exchanges in disguise. Every pass, every tackle, every goal carried a weight that transcended the game itself. These were opportunities for newly independent nations to assert themselves, to showcase their prowess, to demonstrate their capacity for greatness. And in these nascent years, a respectful rivalry began to blossom. It was a rivalry born not of animosity, but of a shared ambition to be the best. Fast forward to the 1970s and 80s, decades that saw the rivalry intensify. The stakes grew higher, the passions more fervent. Football became a crucial arena for national expression. Morocco, with its technical brilliance and tactical discipline, often held the upper hand in these early clashes. Their teams, characterized by flair and a deep understanding of the game, were formidable opponents. Senegal, on the other hand, brought an athleticism, a raw power, and an unyielding spirit that made them a force to be reckoned with. The clashes were epic, a thrilling contrast of styles that kept fans on the edge of their seats. I remember hearing stories from my grandfather, a staunch football enthusiast, about these games. He'd describe the atmosphere, the roar of the crowd, the tension palpable in the air. He'd talk about the sheer artistry of Moroccan players, their ability to glide past defenders with effortless grace. And then he'd paint a vivid picture of the Senegalese Lions, their ferocious determination, their never-say-die attitude. He'd say, when Senegal played Morocco, it wasn't just football, it was a battle of wills, a clash of civilizations on the green pitch. And you could feel the passion in his voice, even decades later. Beyond the pitch, the relationship between Senegal and Morocco was a fascinating blend of cooperation and competition. Diplomatically, They were often aligned on key African issues, advocating for stronger continental unity and a louder voice for Africa on the global stage. There were cultural exchanges, economic partnerships, and a shared sense of African identity that transcended the sporting arena. But even in these diplomatic corridors, the subtle undertones of their football rivalry were never far from the surface. A friendly jest about a past match, a knowing glance when discussing a future encounter, these small moments revealed the enduring influence of football on their broader relationship. The 1990s brought a new era, a turning point for both nations in their footballing journeys. The world was shrinking, and African football was beginning to command global attention. Players from both Senegal and Morocco were making their mark in European leagues, bringing back valuable experience and a higher level of professionalism. This influx of talent elevated the quality of their national teams, making their encounters even more captivating. This was the era when you started to see the emergence of legendary figures who would forever be etched in the annals of African football. For Morocco, players like Mustafa Hadji, with his dazzling dribbling and creative genius, became household names. For Senegal, the likes of El Hadji Diouf, with his explosive pace and audacious skill, captivated audiences worldwide. These individual talents, combined with increasingly sophisticated tactical approaches, turned every Senegal-Morocco match into a spectacle. One particular match from this period stands out in my memory, a qualifier for a major tournament. The tension was unbearable. Both teams knew what was at stake. The stadium was a sea of color, a cacophony of sound. Every touch of the ball was met with either a roar of approval or a collective gasp of anticipation. It was a chess match played at breakneck speed, with moments of breathtaking individual brilliance interspersed with tactical masterstrokes. The game swung back and forth, each team taking turns to dominate, each team pushing the other to its absolute limit. And when the final whistle blew, the result, whatever it was, felt almost secondary to the sheer drama that had unfolded. It was a testament to the respect and fierce competitiveness that defined their rivalry. To truly understand why a football match between Senegal and Morocco feels like a family reunion, where everyone is trying to prove they're the favorite child, we have to look far beyond the white lines of the pitch. We have to go back centuries, long before the first whistle was ever blown in a stadium. The bond between these two nations is cemented in the sand, the spirit, and the scholarship of the African continent. It's a connection that survived empires, colonialism, and the test of time itself. Think about the great trans-Saharan trade routes. For hundreds of years, these weren't just paths for gold, salt, and spices. They were the internet of the ancient world. They carried ideas, faith, and culture. Scholars from the famous universities of Timbuktu and St. Louis in Senegal would travel north to the intellectual hubs of Fez and Marrakech. There was a constant flow of wisdom. This created a shared spiritual DNA. When you walk through the streets of Dakar today, you'll see the influence of the Tidjane Sufi Brotherhood, which has its roots deeply planted in Morocco. This isn't just a religious link, it's a soul-deep connection. It's why a Senegalese person in Casablanca or a Moroccan in Dakar rarely feels like a stranger. They are brothers in faith and history. But as the 20th century dawned, both nations faced the suffocating grip of colonial rule. Senegal was under French administration, while Morocco was a protectorate of both France and Spain. This shared struggle for independence added a new layer to their brotherhood. They weren't just trading partners anymore. They were comrades in a fight for dignity. When Senegal's first president, the poet-philosopher Léopold Sédar Senghor, and Morocco's King Mohammed V looked at each other, they didn't see rivals. They saw leaders of a new Africa. There's a legendary story from the early 1960s that perfectly captures this diplomatic secret of their brotherhood. After Senegal gained independence in 1960, The relationship between King Hassanu and President Senghor became a cornerstone of African stability. While other newly formed nations were clashing over borders and ideologies, Senegal and Morocco were quietly building a bridge. Morocco was one of the first countries to recognize Senegal's sovereignty, and in return, Senegal became one of Morocco's most vocal supporters on the international stage, especially regarding the complex issue of the Western Sahara. This diplomatic secret sauce was based on a simple philosophy: we are stronger together. While the rest of the world saw two separate countries, the leaders in Dakar and Rabat saw a unified front. They shared intelligence, they collaborated on agricultural projects, and they even helped mediate conflicts in other parts of the continent. It was a partnership of the elites, but it trickled down to the people. It's said that King Hassan II once remarked that Senegal was the closest neighbor Morocco has that doesn't share a physical border. Now, let's talk about how this history began to bleed onto the football field. In the 1960s, as both countries were finding their feet, the first battles of the brothers took place. At this time, football was a tool for nation building. Every time the Teranga Lions faced the Atlas Lions, it was a display of African pride. The early games were often friendly in name but fierce in spirit. Morocco had a head start in terms of infrastructure and a professional mindset, often looking toward the Mediterranean and Europe for tactical inspiration. Senegal, meanwhile, was tapping into the raw, unbridled talent of its youth, focusing on power, pace, and an indomitable spirit. In the 1970s, the rivalry took on a more formal, competitive edge. Morocco was emerging as a continental powerhouse, eventually becoming the first African team to top a group at a World Cup in 1986. But Senegal was always the giant killer, lurking in the shadows. The historical respect between the two meant that whenever they played, there was a level of tactical discipline you didn't always see in other African derbies. They knew each other's moves. They studied each other's history. There was a specific moment in the late 70s during a Cup of Nations qualification cycle that old-timers still talk about. The Moroccan team arrived in Dakar to a hero's welcome, not because the Senegalese wanted them to win, but because of that ancient brotherhood. They were hosted in the finest hotels, and the atmosphere was one of celebration. But the moment they stepped onto the grass, the Teranga stopped at the touchline. For 90 minutes, it was war. Morocco's technical maestros were met with a Senegalese wall of defense that refused to crack. It ended in a draw, but the message was clear in football: there are no big brothers, only equals. As the 80s rolled into the 90s, the diplomatic secrets became even more interesting. Behind the scenes, the football federations of both countries began to work together. They shared coaching philosophies and sometimes even training facilities. When Morocco bid for the World Cup, Senegal was one of its loudest cheerleaders. When Senegal made their historic run in 2002, the streets of Casablanca were just as loud as the streets of Dakar. This is the beauty of this rivalry. It's a win-win mentality. If one of us succeeds, Africa succeeds. But don't let the smiles fool you. The pitch remains a place of intense pride. The historical narrative of Morocco as the intellectual, technical side versus Senegal as the physical, powerful side began to shift. Morocco started producing players with incredible strength, and Senegal began producing tactical geniuses who could outthink any European coach. The lines blurred, making the matches even more unpredictable. One of the most fascinating historical footnotes is the role of the fans. In most rivalries, fans are kept apart for safety. But in Senegal vs Morocco matches, you'll often see fans sitting together, draped in their respective flags, sharing tea or a meal before the game. It's a sight that baffles many outsiders. How can you be so competitive and yet so close? The answer lies in those ancient trade routes. The answer lies in the 60 years of diplomatic cables where both countries stood by each other. when the rest of the world turned its back. They have faced each other in scorching heat, in pouring rain, in friendly stadiums, and in hostile environments. They have fought for World Cup spots and for the pride of being called the best in Africa. But every single time, whether it was the Atlas Lions celebrating a technical masterpiece or the Teranga Lions roaring after a physical battle, the post-match ritual was the same: a hug, a jersey exchange, and a reminder that they are first and foremost brothers. This history isn't just a list of dates and scores. It's a living, breathing relationship. It's the story of two nations that decided a long time ago that they didn't need to tear each other down to climb to the top. They realized that by pushing each other, by challenging each other on the pitch, they were actually making each other better. Morocco's rise pushed Senegal to professionalizing. Senegal's physical dominance pushed Morocco to find more resilience. As we move toward the modern era of this rivalry, the stakes have never been higher, but the foundation has never been more solid. We are looking at 60 years of a documented relationship, but we are also looking at 1,000 years of an undocumented bond. When you see the stars of today, the Sadio Manes and the Achraf Hakimis battling it out, you aren't just watching a modern football match. You are watching the latest chapter of a story that began with camel caravans and secret diplomatic handshakes. So, we've talked about the ancient sands and the secret handshakes of kings. But let's bring it into the era of high-definition drama, screaming stadiums, and the kind of tension that makes your heart beat like a West African talking drum. This is where the Brotherhood meets the furnace. This is where the Lions of Teranga and the Atlas Lions stopped being just neighbors and started becoming global icons. The year is 2002. If you were a football fan in Africa at that time, you remember exactly where you were. Senegal didn't just enter the World Cup. They kicked the door down, walked into the VIP lounge, and put their feet up on the table. They beat the defending champions France. And suddenly the whole world was asking, who are these guys? But back in Morocco, they weren't asking, they knew. They had been battling these guys for decades. That 2002 Senegalese team was like a lightning bolt. El Hadji Diouf was dancing past defenders like they were statues, and Papa Bouba Diop was a mountain that no one could climb. While Senegal was making their historic run to the quarterfinals, something interesting happened in Morocco. Even though the Atlas Lions weren't in that tournament, the Moroccan people adopted Senegal. This is that diplomatic secret in action again. You'd see the green, yellow, and red flag flying in North African cafes. When Senegal scored, Morocco cheered. Why? Because when one lion roars, the whole continent feels the power. But don't think for a second that this made the games between them any easier. In fact, it made them tougher. Morocco watched Senegal's success and said, okay, the bar has been raised, now we have to jump higher. Enter the mid-2000s and 2010s, the era of the European connection. This is when the rivalry got a serious tactical makeover. Suddenly, both teams weren't just playing African football, they were playing global football. Both nations started tapping into their massive diasporas. Kids born in Paris, Marseille, and Brussels, who grew up eating Senegalese thibidien or Moroccan tagine, were choosing to play for their homelands. This changed the game. It was like adding rocket fuel to an already burning fire. The matches became faster, the tactics became more chess-like, and the individual battles became legendary. Imagine a young Sadio Mane, with his blistering pace and humble smile, trying to find a way past a Moroccan defense that was organized like a military unit. Or picture the Moroccan magicians like Hakim Ziyech, who can find a pass through a needle's eye, trying to outsmart a Senegalese midfield that felt like it had 12 players instead of 3. There's a specific kind of electricity in the air when these two meet in the Africa Cup of Nations. It's the gold standard of African football. If you want to know who the best in the continent is, you don't look at the rankings, you look at who wins the Battle of the Lions. Let's talk about the mind games. One of the catchiest parts of this rivalry is the psychological warfare. Moroccan fans are famous for their tafos, those massive, incredible stadium displays that cover entire stands. They create an atmosphere that feels like you're walking into a volcano. But Senegalese fans, they bring the 12th man energy. They bring the drums, the non-stop singing, and the gris-gris that make opponents feel like the very ground is shifting under their feet. It's a battle of the senses before the ball is even kicked. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and remember, in the world of the Lions, the game ends at 90 minutes, but the Brotherhood lasts forever. Catch you the next one!